Despite hopes the world would emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic and food security would begin to improve, world hunger rose further in 2021. The prevalence of undernourishment jumped from 8% in 2019 to 9.8% in 2021. New figures estimate as many as 828 million people around the world faced hunger in 2021. This represents an increase of 150 million more people facing hunger in 2021 compared to 2019, the year before the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. Projections suggest nearly 670 million people, or 8% of the world's population, will be facing hunger in 2030, which is the same projection from 2015, the launch year for the SDG 2030 agenda. Hunger continued to rise in Africa, Asia and Latin America and the Caribbean in 2021, but with somewhat slower increases than in 2019 to 2020. In 2021, hunger affected 278 million people in Africa, 425 million people in Asia, and 56.5 million in Latin America and the Caribbean. The ongoing war in Ukraine presents additional food security challenges. Ukraine and Russia are two of the biggest global producers of staple cereals, oilseeds and fertilizer. The conflict is disrupting supply chains and pushing up prices of grains, fertilizer and energy. Simulations of a severe export shortfall from these countries suggest an increase of up to 13 million in 2022 and 19 million more undernourished in 2023 respectively. In 2021, about 2.3 billion people around the world were moderately or severely food insecure. 11.7% of the global population faced food insecurity at severe levels. Globally, malnutrition in all its forms also remains a challenge, with almost 3.1 billion people unable to afford a healthy diet. 149.2 million children under age 5, or 22%, were affected by stunting, and 6.7% suffered from wasting. The actual figures are expected to be higher due to the effects of COVID-19. At the same time, 38.9 million children under 5, or 5.7%, are overweight. The effects of inflation on consumer food prices have increased the costs of healthy diets worldwide. In this challenging environment, policies aimed at bolstering food security and nutrition are more important than ever before. Governments can achieve more with the same public resources. Government support to food and agriculture, such as trade and market interventions, and fiscal subsidies to producers and consumers, can help improve the availability and affordability of healthy diets. Not only is much of the current support to agriculture not promoting the production of nutritious foods, it is also market distorting, not reaching many farmers, and hurts the environment. Repurposing policy support to food and agriculture to increase the availability of nutritious foods can have positive impacts on accessing better nutrition. The challenges we face are daunting, but concerted efforts to repurpose food and agricultural policy support and related spending can help make healthy diets less costly and more affordable for those most at risk.
Hey everyone, Rob Greenfield here.
And I'm Ashley Thomas from the Mocha Gardener.
Today we are taking a trip to the city of Henderson, North Carolina in Vance County.
Interestingly, Vance is one of the counties in North Carolina that has the highest rate of food insecurity, meaning approximately 17% of the population here does not have access to secure food or sufficient amounts of food for a healthy life.
Driving through parts of the city, you'll notice that food options are fairly limited. And for areas that do have more food options, affordability is often a major challenge to people getting the foods they need.
So food access is defined as people's ability to access enough appropriate foods necessary for a nutritional diet.
The aisles that we're walking through right now are typical of what a lot of people have as their access to food. And not just here in Henderson, but this is representative of many rural communities across the nation. You can survive off of this food.
But nutritious food is what helps you to thrive.
Today, we are going to introduce you to a group that has a very different take on food from what you'll find here. They're just on the street here in Henderson, and they are working to create greater food access in their community by turning their yard into a farm that distributes healthy food.
All right, Rob, let's go.
All right. So we're now here at the Green Rural Redevelopment Organization, GROW, in Henderson, and this is a beautiful example of how we can create food security in our communities by growing food right in our own yards.
Mr. and Mrs. Henry and Artis Cruz, the founders of GROW, are on a quest to revitalize their community one bite at a time, starting with their own backyard. So here we have Mrs. Cruz. Mrs. Cruz, I have a question for you.
Okay.
What is access to nutritional foods like in Henderson?
It is not easy. Believe me, it is not easy. There are a lot of economic deficiencies here in Henderson, and you really need a car to get where the grocery stores are. Even though there are grocery stores here, quality is not always good, and certainly in a place where people don't have cars, where they don't have jobs, it's really, really hard to get good food. And one thing that I think is very important that people don't realize, that in today's time, people are no longer in contact with food. We're so used to everything being quick. We've forgotten how to cook food. Starting with me, I didn't know how to cook food. So that's something that we promote.
So one of the really amazing things about GROW is that, as we've mentioned, what you can see here, it looks like a farm, and it is a farm, but it was started right here in your yard. So what was your inspiration and your motivation to start right here?
I think people need to know that wherever you are, you can do a good thing. And if you have a patio, if you have a driveway, if you've got some flowers around your house, you can get rid of some flowers, and instead of planting some of the things that you've done in the past, just simply plant some vegetables, because the best way to have food is to grow food. As we started growing, I had a realization that, in fact, when I look into my history and my ancestors, the thing that I used to hear all the time was food is medicine. That's a going buzzword now, but it is true, and it was true.
And this is so important as we look at utilizing spaces to grow food. I have to ask you one last question, and that is, why is it important for you to grow food right now in a city like this?
It was very interesting when we started this in Henderson, in North Carolina, the agriculture South. You didn't see what people term as urban farming. So it was important for people to know that wherever you are, you can grow food. And it was a way of utilizing empty lots around in the city and getting people involved. There's a lot of healing that comes from growing food.
I can imagine, mentally and physically.
And physically, yes.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. In the United States, we don't actually have a food shortage as a nation as a whole, but we do have inequitable access and distribution to food and to healthy food. Many neighborhoods have enough food, but not healthy options, and this is often referred to as a food swamp.
Now, you've probably heard the term food desert before, but many people are starting to use a more appropriate term, and that is food apartheid, which was coined by food justice advocate Karen Washington. Now, food apartheid really speaks to the root of the systemic barriers that limit access to healthy foods for many people in our community.
So now imagine if everywhere. Every community had something like Grow, and we did this in all of our communities across the nation.
But we don't need an organization like Grow to start now, because we can start in our own backyard.
1 in 9 families will visit a food shelf. 9,000 people today in the state of Minnesota are visiting food shelves.
40% of our families that we serve work at least part-time, and they still need to use our food shelf. As a matter of fact, it was over 15% work full-time and still need to use our food shelf.
Many of our homeless people are well educated. I've seen some people with master's degrees, many people with college educations. They are well aware of good health and good nutrition. They've often eaten well when they were on their own before they became homeless. And so many homeless people have been, very successful members of society. They've owned homes, they've had jobs, and then for whatever reason they've lost all of that.
I have a very bad situation. My husband is a roofer helper, so he fell from the roof. Those days it was, those 8 months, it was so hard for us, and that's why I got involved to the food shelf.
Hunger does exist out here in the suburbs. In fact, suburban hunger is rising at a much faster rate than the inner cities for the last several years, and we've really seen that here with record demand for food, 300% increases since the year 2000.
You may stabilize at a certain point or think you're stabilizing at a certain point, but costs continue to increase. And wages haven't kept pace with them. And it's really not much more complicated than that. Does a family have access to enough money to be able to support themselves? And if you consider transportation costs as increasing, health care increasing, although we're hoping to see some stabilization in that as we move forward, the cost of utilities, the cost of, frankly, just the fact that one kink in a very complex system that you found a way to support your family. I raised 3 sons as a single parent. And what I remember is they were so hungry by the time I got home from work that if I thought that I didn't have access to anything for them for dinner, it would make a highly charged emotional situation that would have repercussions throughout their whole lives. So I know that as a mom, I know that as a grandmother. I mean, food is love for my grandchildren. When they come over, they get to have all the naughty things they can't have at home. But I think it's really important that we remember that it could happen, and it did happen to your next door neighbor. It did. One car repair, one unexpected health care dilemma, or an accident can throw that family budget into chaos for months, for sometimes years. And really the food budget is the last thing people have any control over. You don't get to decide what your mortgage payment's going to be or what your housing's going to cost or how much your utilities are going to be. You don't get to call up the utility company and tell them, well, this month my kids need to go to school and they need school supplies, so I'm only going to pay you this much. They tell you how much you're going to pay. But that food budget is the last area really where there's flexibility, and then people find they can't make it through the month and they visit the food shelf.
I don't qualify for any food support. My husband currently is out of work and he has some medical conditions. 2 of my children have autism, and sometimes it's just a real stretch and we run out of finances and the grocery money just, too soon. Paycheck to paycheck, and it's, just gets hard sometimes. We can pay most of our, bills, and we kind of have to juggle those. And when it comes to the grocery bill, sometimes we're just running a little short. And so when we've been needing help, the food shelf has been available for us, and it's always been helpful. But when you just don't have food and it's a week till paydays, we're kind of down to the crackers. It's like, well, thankful that we have a place that has provided extra nutrition for the kids.